Sister Melina, first and foremost, I read about what happened to you at Cal State, you being removed by force by LAPD. And this was happening, and Keenan, if we want to show that video, brother, please. This was happening during a mayoral event where there were a number of protesters out there because they were protesting, saying that all the candidates at this mayoral event was not being represented. And as a result of that, police decided to take you into custody and others. And we show this video right now, Sister Melina. Tell us what was going on. What led to you being removed? What led to the fact that, you know, it didn't seem like there were anyone that really came to your aid?
So let me give you the moments before the violent removal, my violent removal. So you got what happened, what people captured outside of the event, but inside the event, it was in a student union theater, which accommodates about 192 people. There were less than 20 folks in. I've been a professor at Cal State LA for 20 years. I teach Black Power. And I had my students there, and I told them there's a mayoral debate. You know, we're going to go, we're going to analyze it. We're going to talk about what it means that the first viable Black woman candidate is running. And they were denied entry, but I've been there 20 years, so I know every entrance to every building. So I just walked around and walked in through another door and sat in the theater. And as I was sitting there, the director of the center that was sponsoring it walks up to me. I've also known him for more than 20 years. He walks up and says, "This is a ticketed event." I had on my mask, so I took off my mask and I said, "It's me." And he doesn't say anything, but 20 minutes later, it was actually campus police come in. And one of my colleagues was asked to leave, and she left or starts to move, and then they tell me to leave, and I contest that, not protest, but I said, "I teach here." Next thing you know, they grab me by my shoulders and drag me down the aisle. I'm reaching for my purse, and when I get to the end of the aisle, the two male officers yell out to the women officers, "Grab her feet." And they grabbed me by all fours, each of them tugging in a different direction. I'm yelling, "You're hurting me." None of the candidates on the stage did anything. All of the candidates were on the stage. The director of the center doesn't say, "Hey, leave her alone." They actually carry me through the building. And why it looks like no one came to my aid is because about 50 folks were trying to get in through the front door. They saw me being carried out through the back door, and so it took them some time to run around the back. And about 50 to 60 folks were actually able to free me from police custody. And what's happened since is I'm very proud of my university, my university's faculty. On Tuesday, we decided that, you know, it's the president of the university, whose name is Bill Covino, who enabled this. And so a vote of no confidence was taken in him, and 91% of the academic senate voted no confidence in Bill Covino, and and voted to look at alternatives to policing on our campus. So I was severely harmed. It was May Day. It was the last day of Ramadan. It was the first day of Teacher Appreciation Week, all of these things happening. I was harmed physically, and I was also humiliated, right? So my legs spread open, you know, I was dressed, but, you know, it was not a way that anyone should be treated. And we're going to turn that harm into something that's a victory for both the campus, but also the broader Black community.
And one of the big things, Sister Melina, is that you're calling for the president of Cal State to resign. Is that correct?
Yes, we're calling for him to resign, to step down, or be removed by the Board of Trustees.
And what has been, as a result of that call, of that demand, what has been the feedback that you received?
So that's the no confidence vote, that
Okay.
91% of the academic senate agrees that he needs to go.
So this all happened. I mean, just to let our watchers know, you are a tenured professor. This is where you got your tenure at Cal State.
Yes, I'm a tenured professor. I was chair of Pan-African Studies for 9 years. I've been teaching there 20 years. You know, I'm an academic senator, so I'm part of the university's leadership. No one should be treated like that. But if I could be treated like that, that means anyone can be treated like that. And we know that the president of Cal State LA has a really long history of anti-Blackness. They're very angered by the fact that the majority, or at least half of the original members of Black Lives Matter, come from the Department of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. It was, you know, we Black Studies, Pan-African Studies is about developing intellectual tools so that we can work for the freedom of our people. And so, you know, in 2013, when Black Lives Matter was birthed, it was students and faculty from Pan-African Studies in the streets birthing Black Lives Matter, not only in Los Angeles, but that would be the first chapter that then births this movement that becomes the largest global movement for racial justice in the history of the world. And you would think that anybody like us who say, you know, well, that's what universities should be doing. They should be honing those intellectual tools. We'd be praising that. But instead, if you are leadership or misleadership like Bill Covino, you see that as a threat and you try to squash that, including attacking people like me and others. I'm not the first person to be attacked. He's called campus police on students. He's called campus police on faculty and been really, really anti-Black over his 9-year legacy. And so we're saying that that legacy needs to come to an end now.
So there were, I mean, this was a mayoral debate. You had some of the major candidates running for the mayor of Los Angeles, President Karen Bass and others. What did they do while this was all happening?
They did absolutely nothing. And that's also, you know, hurtful. I've also known Karen Bass for 20 years. Another one of the so-called front runners, his name is Kevin De Leon. I've known him for 20 years. In fact, he was my student. I often take credit for him because he took my class voting campaigns and elections, and now he's in office, right? These are people that Karen and I communicate on at least a weekly basis. And so I actually, as I was being hurt, I said, they're hurting me. And I called both of them by name, and neither of them lifted a finger or said a word.
That's a hard pill to swallow, Sister Melina.
It is.
This is a hard pill to swallow, to hear the story, and we want to, let's bring Rashad back into this as well. To hear this story and you know, it's a very hard pill to swallow. Like, there's one thing that you can disagree with a person, you know, on their ideology or their philosophy or their, you know, when it comes to, you know, certain issues. But it's another thing when things get physical, especially for Black women, when Black women are involved, that no one has done anything. I read, Sister Melina, that there were about 50 people that were in attendance for this debate. That this wasn't, even though it was in a big venue, that there weren't a lot of people there. Did anybody come to your aid while this was all going on?
So there were about 50 people outside who'd been locked out of the event, but inside that theater that seats 192 people, there were about 20 people, and that includes the candidates and the media. In fact, it was so sparsely attended that I heard the cameramen who were standing behind me going, "Where is everybody? Where are all the students?" And the truth is, the students were locked outside.
Wow.
Yeah, this, just listening to our sister, one, I want to say, we recognize and we honor you for your work. And I'm fortunate that you had to go through this, but thank you for standing in whom you are in your work. It sounds like much of a powder keg situation that it was brewing over years, but it had to take this one particular incident to move things and have these courageous decisions that should have been addressed years ago. So, but thank you for being, an unwarranted martyr. And I think most of the time, who acts to be a martyr in that work. But I'm grateful that you're still alive and you still be able to give your voice to the unfortunate circumstance. But being the change agent and the champion you are for us as a community, thank you for still staying steadfast in your work. Um, but what gets me is these 3 points as I'm listening to your story. One is the idea of around having a closed ticketed event for a forum that should be that is centered around public elected officials, right? So what is the intentionality of having a ticketed event that is minimum in representation and people being in the audience on a large scale university that has its own department that is building up young people, and it shows this validity and impact as one of the young people that was a past student as an elected official and often going towards expanding into another political office. It calls into question the intent of that actual forum, the college and the university, and as well as seeing the interests of the young people in the communities that wants to be there. Why not create space for them to hear the same person, if elected, that will have the pen and power that directly impacts their community? And that is an issue that we have around civic engagement. If we are going to be civically engaged people, we need the
Mm-hmm.
space to do so, to hear directly from those people. And the second one is when they see these situations happen and you have a interpersonal, intergenerational relationship with these elected officials that are serving or are candidates to serve in position. When you have these incidents that happen in real time and you see them not show up and use their power and influence to address or be resolute in that manner, it makes you question what would they actually do once they are elected.
Mm.
And the third part is with our sister, with anyone that understands or have went into higher education knows that getting a tenure position is not easy at all. It comes with a sense of that person have their own credibility, expertise, and knowing their work and the impact and how it can directly build up the credibility of the institution, but also how they pour into our young people. That this sister has done her work shows for itself. That if there is not any place where an intellectual should feel at home is, it should be on a college university. And to possess and exemplify that power, that skill set, and your intellect, and be closed out of the opportunity for you to exude that, it calls into question the university, and it calls into question when do we allow and create lanes for our people to show up in their strengths. If she cannot show up in her strength of what that is, and to bring her students in there to implement their skills and what they're learning in real time, is our colleges and university really servicing their purpose?
Mm. Sister Melina.
I would just, I appreciate all that was shared, and I would just, I guess, underline some of the points that were made, especially the points around the candidates. If they're running for mayor of Los Angeles, one of the things that we saw is after the abuse happened, everybody was outraged, and I'll send you some of the video of what happened inside, because what happened inside was even more horrific than what happened outside, right? And so I'm yelling, they're hurting me, and calling them by name. What the candidates said, Karen Bass and Kevin De Leon said, is they acknowledge that they know me very well, that they've known me for 20 years, and then said, we didn't know that was her. What bothers me is, one, I don't believe them. That I think I'm pretty recognizable. In fact, when I yelled out, I even took my mask off to make sure they could see me. And even though it's a 192 person theater, that's still very small. So the debate hadn't started, they could see. I also have a radio show and have a pretty distinctive voice. So I think they would recognize my voice, even if they didn't see my face. But I think the bigger point is, what if it wasn't me? So what? So what if it wasn't me? What if it was some other Black woman faculty who's saying, I teach here, you're hurting me, and calling for help? You shouldn't have to know that person in order to come to their aid. And if that's the kind of leadership we're looking at, that's not the kind of leadership I desire for the city. I think that anytime someone is being abused by police, especially leaders, should hop in and at the very minimum say, what's going on? Question it, you know?
So this situation here, Sister Melina, it just continues to add to, you know, the trials that Black Lives Matter has been under, where there some people are losing their, you know, with the alliances that were made over the past decade, are starting to, what some people would say, are starting to kind of fall apart, because some people say, hey, BLM is still, you know, saying this and that, but the reality is that, you know, the conditions of Black communities and other folks, things aren't really changing. The latest controversy around how the money is used, so people are saying, well, why should we help them when they seem to be self-serving? And I, you know, and I wanted to bring you on because, one, I wanted for you to tell your story unapologetically and unfiltered, in an unfiltered way. But then two, you know, how should people start to look at the work that you're doing as an individual, as a Black woman activist, as a tenured professor, but then looking at the work that you're doing as part of this larger movement? You know, how do people, you know, what do you advise for people to do, or how to look at this situation and say, well, okay, well, Sister Melina was hurt, but I don't like Black Lives Matter because of A, B, and C. It's, you know, I don't know if the buy-in or if the trust and faith that people have for Black Lives Matter is as strong as it used to be, where a moment like this, they would have normally stepped in a few years ago. But now that things have changed, you know, how do you want people to look at this situation? It's just trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah. So I do want to say that as terrible as it was, what happened to me, people did step in. And again, they wrestled me, literally, physically wrestled me at great risk to themselves away from, you know, the police who were trying to bring me harm. So I want to lift that up. And I want to say, if there's beauty in anything, there's beauty in that. I also want to say, of course, we've all witnessed what's been happening with the assaults on Black Lives Matter. And I really, again, appreciate Rashad's grounding in Black political history, right? If we think about any movement for Black liberation, so Black Lives Matter is not about, you know, okay, there's these systems, we want reform. We're saying that these systems were built in order to bring harm to Black people, right? Prisons descend from plantations, police descend from paddy rollers. There is no reforming that, right? We have to completely reimagine systems of public safety and invest deeply in systems of care. We can't think that by moving police into our neighborhoods, that's going to be the solution. In fact, as a Black mother of 3 children who lives in a Black neighborhood, I don't want police living in my neighborhood. What I want is strong neighborhoods where, you know, everybody has the resources that we need, right? Where the community is nurtured, where we have food and good jobs. Those are the things that we need. And when we say that that's what we're advocating for, that's what we're fighting for, that's what we're putting our bodies on the line for. And now, with people having poured money into Black Lives Matter, we actually have some resources to do some things. That is a direct threat to white supremacy. And so, of course, we're taking on the full-on backlash of those who want to maintain a system that brings us harm, that exploits us for their benefit. And so much of what you're seeing in terms of the assaults on Black Lives Matter, if you think about the outlets they come out in, these are not real media sources. So the Washington Examiner is not the Washington Post, and the New York Post is not the New York Times. So people need to be a little bit more savvy about who's putting what out. We also need to be thoughtful about, some of the attacks around, did Black Lives Matter buy a property? Yes, Black Lives Matter bought a property. You know who else has property? The Red Cross, the American Cancer Society, the ACLU, virtually every organization that has any resource, including Black organizations like the NAACP and the Urban League. This is one of the ways that we sustain our dollars. And we need to remember that even though tens of millions of dollars poured in 2020, that was unprecedented and it may never happen again. So it's our duty to make sure those dollars stretch. And I'm saying that as one who's actually not on the money side of Black Lives Matter. I'm the director of Black Lives Matter Grassroots, which means I'm the movement side, not the money side. But I'm saying that I understand the need to stretch those dollars so that we can continue to do the work on the ground. And I think that our pushback as Black people who want freedom for our folks has to be, look, we need to deeply invest in this work. What's happened over the last 8.5 years, Black Lives Matter was born July 13th, 2013, the day that the murderer of Trayvon Martin was acquitted. We need to remember that in the last 8.5 years, we have built a tremendous force. I don't know if people remember pre-2013, when anytime we said Black, we had to hide it under this umbrella of people of color, or we had to follow it up very quickly and go Black and brown, as if we couldn't just say Black. The idea of saying unapologetically that Black people require freedom, my children require freedom, future generations require freedom, is something that's been ushered in. And that has meant differences in the ways in which we're represented in media. It's meant a commitment to liberatory models of education. It's meant a pushback against the assaults that we experience every day at the hands of police and prison systems. And so it means that for Black people, we can't allow a backlash, a white supremacist backlash who wants to hold on to old ways of being to really cause us to turn our backs on the most viable movement of our lifetimes.
Mm. And at this point, Sister Melina, do you want people to, do you think that people are justified in walking away, not showing their support for Black Lives Matter, or do you, or what are your thoughts around that? Sister Melina?
We have a protest in front of the Police Association. I don't know if you're in Los Angeles, every single week. And they're not the hundreds of thousands of people that we saw in the street in 2020, but it is hundreds of people. So the idea that people are turning their backs on Black Lives Matter actually is not true. It's that, in a moment where we're moving out of a pandemic, when we're trying to find our footing financially, people can't be in the streets forever. We're still resolute. We're still saying names like Peter Leoya, or Patrick Leoya, who was murdered in Grand Rapids. We're still lifting up names like Andrew Joseph III, who was 14 years old when he was murdered as a result of police action in Tampa, Florida. We're still fighting for Black lives and demanding changes in policy. In terms of Andrew Joseph's name, we're demanding the end of qualified immunity, right? We're still taking that on. It just can't forever look like hundreds of thousands and even millions of people in the streets consistently, but we have to fight in every way that we can. I'm especially inspired by the children who are leading the Black Lives Matter in Schools work along with their teachers, saying that we need to invest heavily in education and nurses and counselors and librarians on our campuses, and remove the police who actually on a daily basis traumatize our children. And they've been really, really successful in demanding care, not cops on their campus, and demanding police-free schools all across the country, but especially in cities like Los Angeles and Oakland. And so, no, I don't think Black people are turning their backs on Black Lives Matter, but we have to remind ourselves that this work is constant. And in the words of Angela Davis, freedom is a constant struggle.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?